Hello, everyone, and welcome to Intersections Online as part of our 2021 Alumni Week celebrations. Intersections brings together experts within and around the university community on a wide range of issues that concern our society and, of course, our future. Before I introduce the moderator of this panel, I want to pay my respects to the Indigenous peoples, elders, and ancestors who stewarded and cared for the nature and people who live on this land. This university is making an unapologetic and sincere commitment to reconciliation and decolonization, especially in this time as we work to identify a new name that reflects what we stand for and where we want to go. Please join us at the President's Session as part of Alumni Week and throughout the year to learn more about this work. So, this gathering explores the future of sports. For many of us, the first sign of the seriousness of this global pandemic was the abrupt suspension of the NBA season in March 2020. Other professional leagues followed and then struggled with new rules and regulations as the world grappled with COVID-19. As we enter another phase of the pandemic, perhaps even a long tail close to this era, we have assembled an incredible group of experts to discuss how professional, amateur, and varsity sports can rise and thrive in this context. I'm sure you'll have questions for our panel, so if you'd like to pose one, please use the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will do our best to attend to them. We are so fortunate to have a great alumnus moderate this discussion. Justin Bobb is the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, with a focus on the development and execution of team strategies for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Toronto FC, and the Toronto Argonauts. In addition to his role at MLSE, Justin has coached basketball in the community, high school, clubs, and college levels for over 12 years. He has an extensive background in social impact through community and sport development, as well as the social housing sector, all while using sports as a tool of engagement to support youth facing barriers. Justin is a sociology graduate of our university. So Justin, it's over to you and to our panel for the next hour or so.
Thank you, Christian, for that warm introduction. As a proud alumnus, I'm really happy to hear that rendition of our land acknowledgement and taking accountability as a university community for what needs to be done next. Before I even introduce the panelists, I'll take this moment to just speak to my personal statement around reconciliation and utilizing my platform to the best of my ability to build and create opportunities for Indigenous youth to have sport pathways, to have what I was able to have, which was sport being a transformative tool in my life. So thanks for that introduction. Without further ado, really proud to introduce you all to some wonderful panelists. We're going to have a great conversation today. As Christian mentioned, happy to take your questions from the audience. I'll always take your questions. Doesn't mean I'll ask them, but please send them in when you got them. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sherry Bradish. She's a dear friend and colleague, an industry leader, an absolute pioneer in sport business and just sport overall. She established the first North American industry-facing sport and tech program, The Next Big Idea, in 2015 at this university, in partnership with Rogers Communications. Sherry now is the founder and managing director of the Future Sport Lab, the FSL, an innovation lab and sport tech incubator supported by Maple Leaf Sport and Entertainment. She is a proud graduate, and very proud, I'll tell you, of Florida State University and the University of Guelph, where she was a member of the varsity volleyball team. So Sherry, please feel free to turn your camera on and give a wave to our wonderful audience.
Thank you, Justin.
Next, Louise Cohen, who was appointed the Executive Director of Athletics and Recreation in 2019. Louise is respected at the post-secondary level with over 25 years of experience within institutions across Canada, always maintaining a strong connection to sport, well-being, and inclusion throughout her career. One of the things that I noticed as someone who participated a lot in varsity athletics at this school is with Louise taking over, really that shift away from only being high performance and really focusing on the well-being and inclusion pieces, which I really appreciate. Louise received her Master's of Physical Education from Dalhousie University, where she was a Killam Scholar, a varsity athlete, and varsity team manager. I think being a team manager is way harder than being an athlete, so kudos for that. She holds a PhD in educational studies from McGill University and also swam in the 1978 and 82 Commonwealth Games. Louise, welcome to the panel. Greg Douglas is a senior consultant with Monitor Deloitte based in Toronto. Working with senior leadership teams for leading Canadian businesses, his focus is on corporate and business unit strategy projects in the private and public sector, including financial services, healthcare, and other consumer-facing industries. Prior to being at Deloitte, Greg was an Olympic athlete competing at the 2008 and 2012 Olympic Games in the sport of sailing. Greg holds an MBA from Queen's University and a Bachelor of Commerce from this university as well. Greg, welcome to the panel.
Great to be here.
Julio is the assistant international scout for the Toronto Blue Jays. It is fitting because when he cuts his camera on, you will see that he is not here right now, but he still made the time for us and we really appreciate it. Julio's main focus is to aid the Jays Latin American scouts on the ground in a plethora of ways. Julio serves to bridge the gap in language and operation between Latin America and Toronto while helping oversee scouting processes in the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, Mexico, and beyond. Julio graduated from this university in 2015 with a degree in Bachelor's of Commerce, all while playing on the university's baseball team. Julio, welcome. So there's really only one place to start, and it's with Julio. Why are you in a car? Where are you?
Yeah, so I'm in Florida. I'm in Fort Lauderdale. We're covering some Bahama players that are down here just because we wanted to see them against a little better pitching. It's a better environment to see them play in. Yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Appreciate that. And as we get started, you got to give us your guarantee for this Yankee series because we all want to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I just want to take 2 of 3. If we take 2 of 3, we're good. Why not 3 of 3? That's what
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Appreciate you joining us. So I'm going to start with some questions for the group. And as I mentioned, please, if you've got something to add from the audience, please send it in the chat function as well. The purpose of this conversation is really to talk about the intersections of sport. Sherry, I'll start with you. The world really stopped when sports stopped. What do you see as some of the greatest opportunities for the business of sport coming out of this pandemic?
Great question. Thank you. And I think the intersection piece is so important. And I think we'll touch on that as we go forward. So I won't spend as much time talking about that. But I think we have seen 2 transformational shifts that I'm looking at and my colleagues are looking at on the business side of sports since COVID-19 in March 2020. One is obviously how is sport coming back, and that's with this with technology at the forefront. And I think as an exemplar, we look at the NBA bubble and we look at how and why the NBA came back so successfully and look at the case studies attached to it. And I think we see sport will be integrating technology and using technology. Look at how we're conducting this today in a way that we've never seen before. And so we knew it was coming. We've been looking at it for 5 years. Really actively, North America has embraced sport innovation, even though feels like we've been talking about it a long time. But it is actively at the forefront of the business of coming back and the business of sport. The other thing I just wanted to share is that the relationship between key consumers, which are the fans, and sport has changed as well. And I think it's something of interest to talk about because of fan engagement is changing. And so it's at the forefront of consumer mindsets. And the second stakeholder are our athletes and athlete rights that we see over the last year and a half, without a doubt. You want to, whether we're talking grassroots or varsity sport or the business of sport, and Louise, I'm sure, has some anecdotes there and comments. The athlete as the producer of the sport has changed, rightly so. And so it's brought up some interesting points. So technology and then 2 main stakeholders, the fan and the athlete. I believe we've fundamentally seen the business model of sport change. So I'll pause at that and we can pick up on that on the other side.
That's great, Sherry. I really appreciate that. Greg, I'm gonna go to you next as Sherry talked a lot about the consumer side of sport. As a person who does strategy for consumer facing businesses, what do you hear from Sherry that really resonates with you on the business side?
Yeah, I think the The business of sport is rapidly changing right now, especially as we think to digital and way that digital industries are, I work across a range of different industries, and everyone right now is focused on their digital transformation. So I think, in sport, we see that as well, where organizations, clubs, teams, athletes are having to transform their business very quickly and engage with new digital channels. So I think we'll continue to see that as we come out of the pandemic.
That's a great answer. Louise, in talking about transforming business, how have things shifted in student athletics coming out of this pandemic?
Well, I think that we're yet to really feel the long-term effects. We're very excited right now that our varsity season is just getting back into action. So we're getting back into action in a modified way, but I don't think that we really have seen the long-term financial impacts with respect to the ways in which universities may fund their varsity sports in the future. I think is an open question. But I think that at the moment we are at a place of great rejoice and happiness that we see a bright year ahead, and we hope for a bright future ahead. I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think you spoke of the bright future, and I really appreciate that. I need that kind of positive energy in my life too. Julio, as you think about the bright future, the globalization of sport really creates opportunities and challenges to the landscape. If you're literally looking at international talent as we speak, what's the greatest opportunity you're most passionate about seizing?
Yeah, so naturally just being in scouting is, for me, it's just signing the next big player. So over the years, we've seen growth in different countries. So specifically speaking, Brazil, huge country, soccer focused, but we're starting to see the Japanese influence within the country. So baseball is growing there. We've actually signed a couple kids. There's Colombia, and Colombia is super interesting because with what's going on in Venezuela, a lot of Venezuelans are now living in Colombia, and then there's been academies set in place. So for me, I think Colombia in the next couple of years is going to be interesting just to see the impact. Like, are more Colombian born people going to be starting to play baseball, and like, what is the growth they're going to look like? Because there's already talent there, but now it could really blow. And then, like I said, look, we're covering some Bahama kids. So you got the small islands like Aruba, Curacao, Bahamas, and there's a ton of talent there. But now it's how do we help them grow that talent, get better? And then I was recently in Europe, and I was shocked. I said, what? Why am I in Europe? Like, what are we going to see here? And I was shocked by the talent and even just the facility. So like money's going into it. And it was really impressive. So yeah, for me, it's just naturally being in scouting is let's get the best player. And it's interesting just to see what countries are starting to grow in baseball.
That's a great answer. I appreciate that. Sherry, as you think about that growth and globalization, the Future Sport Lab is literally about thinking about what could be next. What do you see as next with that global view?
I mean, without a doubt, there is a global view, right, in terms of how these technologies live and operate. I think we could speak to a few areas, at least on the tech side or innovation side, where we see a lot of these companies, to get to the granular, what the Future Sport Lab does is it deals with sport tech startups on a daily basis. So, we talk about, let me just unpack it a little bit. So without getting too much into it. So we have always historically, and Greg's shaking his head because he worked with us when we first started in 2015. And we always talked about, well, there's really two categories of sport innovation that are happening globally. It's usually player performance, or how do we help the athlete get better, or helping the business get better of sport. And on the business side, we see, so I'll just give you a couple examples of each, but that's kind of the primer on it. On the business side, related to what I talked about earlier, there's a lot of technologies that are helping venues open up. So how do we get safe? How do we enter properly, et cetera, et cetera. There's also some emerging categories. So in this country, in particular, the emergence of single game betting and the money that's coming behind it is, and I see how much attention Louise is getting in the Q&A, so I know where probably the audience wants to go. So I'll just say that's getting a lot of attention, and there's so much new money coming into this country attached to single game betting and technologies that surround it, similar to esport and the esport movement. 5 years ago, we weren't talking about those two things, right, Greg? So it's just important to talk about those and how it's changing. On the player side, health and safety, without a doubt. We want, and the companies and the businesses talk about, the faster, higher, stronger values and principles in their technologies. But health and safety, I would say, is arguably the most important, particular, whether it be concussion-based, et cetera, or mental health-based. We see a lot of concern and attention, rightly so, looking at technologies that can help the individual athlete and then their team, again, grassroots to high performance, get better. So those are global conversations, but we're very fortunate in this country to have really smart founders and companies being incubated here. And so there's lots of examples of that. So that's kind of an overview of where we see technology happening globally and nationally.
I really love that answer. And I think, bringing the tech piece of it into it is so important, because you're right. It's just right through, cutting through the entire, fabric of sport at this point. Greg, once an Olympian, always an Olympian. I want you to put your Olympian hat on, your athlete hat on. How have you transferred the skills of competition strategy to business strategy? Sherry just touched on it. Like, things are changing rapidly, especially in the social media age. So what advice can you give the people in the audience listening about how to take the things you learned in competition and put it into your day job now in strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the world is always accelerating in terms of pace. We're never going to go slower than we are today. So it's, strategy and strategic thinking will always, be very, very important. And when I was competing, I didn't really understand or make the connection to business strategy that I did now. And now that I've spent time in both worlds, I really realized that, strategic thinking is all about making choices. Each day you make a choice in terms of the actions that you're doing, and you have to make choices in terms of the strategy that you're pursuing, either as a business or as an athlete. So when I was an athlete, I made, strategic choices about, which competitions I was going to play in, or, the skill sets and different pieces I need to put together my sport, where I was going to focus my time, what decisions I was going to make, in terms of my equipment and things like that. And that was all part of my strategy. Now that I work with, businesses within Canada, I bring a lot of that thinking forward from my time as an athlete. And I say, okay, as a business, where are you going to play? How are you going to win? Which I was thinking about competitions when I was competing, but for a business, it's, which industries are you going to play in, which markets? And then how are you going to win? What capabilities do you need as an organization? So similar to me, I'd say, in sailing, I needed to work on, this type of maneuver. I can help a business. I'll look and say, look, this part of your business needs to be worked on. And this is how you're going to improve it. And this is how you're going to win within your chosen industry. And always staying true to that North Star strategy, or your North Star aspiration, as a business or an athlete is very, very important. And I think, through the pandemic, those who've been able to really dive deep and have a clear focus on, all right, this is where we want to go as a business. The world has changed around us, but our aspiration is still true. Our choices that we've made, still hold, and we can just adjust and, come away as winners through this as well.
I really love that. I think the comment around the North Star is so important, and it's almost like the pandemic's forced us all to reconfigure what's most important. So Louise, a question from the audience, what's the North Star? What do you see as the single greatest opportunity for the growth in post-secondary sport in Canada? And they've asked the next 3 to 5 years, but if you want to shorten that into 1 to 3, because I bet your world's changing every semester right now.
Yeah, I think that the right now is perhaps an opportunity to succeed where we haven't really shown our true potential of success. I actually think that sports spectatorship of students coming to games and having an opportunity to connect in person, in action, is a real live moment for us now. During the pandemic, everyone has been locked away in the confines of their own living circumstance. And so I think that what we're seeing is a real appetite for students to be together. So how can we create that sense of school spirit, sense of belonging, sense of connectedness, using our varsity teams as the rallying point? So I know that our marketing team and our varsity operations team are hard at work thinking about that. I think that's an immediate possibility. I think also, and Sherry mentioned the real rise of esports. The number of students who are engaged in this internationally, globally, and indeed the appetite and interest locally, both in Toronto and at Ryerson, is real. And I think as a department, we have to find a way to really situate where we're going to align with esports. They are a club right now. Are we going to invest in our engagement with them further? And then I think also, and it's pandemic related, and this is really about the impact on mental health and that the COVID pandemic has brought upon us. And I think the opportunity to really provide a welcoming environment for all students to see their place as fitting and belonging in our recreational programs, in our recreational spaces, to reducing barriers, to really seeking out equity deserving groups and making sure that who we are and what we offer is welcoming and engaging for all, no matter their previous experience. So I think coming from the pandemic, it's a short-term answer. I think in terms of long-term answer, I think it's really about leveraging this moment, not just to live for the good of now, but how we might always also use that into the future as well.
It's such a great answer. I've got great news for you, Louise. I have eligibility left. So if you need someone to join your esports team, I'm probably not the right person, but if you're short, you can call me. Great answer. Honestly, let's stay on the conversation of equity, Sherry, because this has been something that has been part of your life, and you've made it your task every single day to speak on and work towards greater equity in sport. Give me a win. I want something positive that's happened over this pandemic that's keeping you inspired about this fight for sport equity.
That's a great positioning of a question that we've heard for 25 years. So, and Louise can I'm sure has an anecdote too. You know, I think without a doubt, the conversation and that has been happening on the sidelines about let's support female sports is moved centrally. And that can be from grassroots to high performance, but a win specifically is looking at how you look at, let's say, for instance, the numbers behind the WNBA and the US Open and women's soccer, and people are watching and paying attention and consuming female sport. And if you see it, you can believe it. And we know that adage. And so it gives great hope for where we're going next. And hopefully we see MLSE with a female sport team soon, Justin. But that's I think we're headed in the right direction of a conversation that's been happening for a long time.
I hope so too. I'm putting it on record. This is being recorded. I do think the Chicago Sky are going to surprise some people in this WNBA playoffs. So I'm putting it on record early. I know, Sherry, you haven't been pleased with watching professional sports on unbranded college courts over this last little stretch. So I know we got to work towards that. Julio, I want to go to you and stay on this concept of equity, but answer Amanda's question in the chat. You're traveling a lot. You're seeing grassroots sport in a way different than most of us. Like, you're seeing it in different countries. You talked about the political and social issues happening in Venezuela, which is forcing a lot of athletes and just people to leave, to migrate. What do you think is going to be different? And you can think about baseball specifically or more broadly when you think about the recreational or grassroots entry level into sport from really that third world and emerging, society perspective.
Wow, that's a tough one. So I am my background. I'm Venezuelan too. Like, my parents are from Venezuela. So the thing that is very tricky for some people to understand, like, these kids in baseball in Latin America do not go to school. When they turn like 11 or 12, because the market has become so aggressive, they leave school at the age of 12 to focus solely on baseball. So for them, it's baseball or nothing. So I hope that changes, because that, to me, is, you gotta understand, like, the vast majority of these kids are not making it into, they're not going to make enough money in baseball to be able to, live comfortably. So I hope that does change, where we don't have to start looking at kids as young anymore. They don't feel the pressure to leave school. But at the end of the day, like in baseball, like we do change lives. Like we have the ability to change lives. Like some of these kids have now generational wealth because they signed and they've played and they've been successful. I think us personally, like the Blue Jays, we've understood this and we've implemented programs within our own, system. So kids that come in from Latin America are in our Dominican complex. We now offer a GED program. Every single kid goes through it. So when they finish baseball, if they do not continue to play, they have opportunities. They learn to speak English. They learn about other cultures. We also implemented we asked the kids, hey, what are some things you want to learn? So some of them want to learn how to cut hair, and the other one was how to install solar panels. So they leave, they don't make it. Now they have other opportunities as well. So for us, I take great pride in that, just being a Latino myself and understanding how these kids struggle to find one meal a day, and it's baseball or nothing. So I take great pride in knowing that we offer them an opportunity for growth, not just in baseball, but outside as well. I don't know if that answers the question at all, but
This is it
kind of just
perfectly.
went that way.
I really appreciate your perspective. It's dope. Honestly, it's an honest and genuine answer for someone with lived experience. Listen, we need more pitchers on the Blue Jays, but we could always use Dominican barbershops up here. So I love the life skills side of that too. It's dope.
Yeah.
I think that's a great segue. A question from someone in the audience around a commitment to developing a whole student athlete. Louise, as Julio speaks to, it can't just be about baseball. I know that that's the way that you lead your organization, but student athletics has really just been viewed as extracurricular, but the demands on your student athletes are intense. How do you describe, how would you want the role to be described of your athletics and recreation department within the broader higher education system?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And Julio, I really love to hear how the program is supporting not just those who succeed to sign a contract, but when you talk about the ways in which you're helping young people develop go to work skills and the English language. With respect to the answer to the question, though, I think that it's really important that extracurricular is reframed as co-curricular. That the language of the university today is that it's not just students come to university to get a degree, but really they come to university to develop their self. And this notion of co-curricular is that those out of classroom experiences are as important as what takes place in the formal curriculum. I think when you say about them being students and athletes, I think it's really important also to say that we recruit students first and that graduation is key. And that year over year, we have been increasing our GPA of our student athletes, and we're very proud of that. You also say that the demands on student athletes are intense, and just for the audience, just to frame what that means, our student athletes are practicing 8 to 12 hours a week. They're enrolled in at least 3 classes in each semester. Some student athletes are enrolled in as many as 5. It's not just about going to class, there's readings, there's papers, there's tests and exam preparation. Some have part-time jobs to finance their education as well. And then there's a whole travel and competition. So when you say intense, it really is intense. But in terms of the university ecosystem, it really is like an internal team that supports their success. The department employs full-time coaches, full-time assistant head coaches, a strength and conditioning coach, a learning strategist, tutors to support academically, counselor, marketers, and an administrative team. But it's also important that the Department of Athletics and Recreation at Ryerson is not a single little entity. It's not an island within the university. I see my role actually as an educator of university colleagues to ensure that the unique demands of the student athletes and all they have to juggle are well supported across the university ecosystem. So that means deep connections to the registrar's office staff, to student financial aid, to access and accommodation services, the university marketing department, regularized connections with faculty and associate deans. And then I can't understate the importance of connections into the president's office, the provost's office, and colleagues in the vice provost students portfolio. And also to single out the support from the president and the vice provost students who take great pride in our student athletes and that they're big supporters of the varsity program. They recognize that our student athletes are excellent university citizens and have developed a set of skills that employers are looking for. But I mentioned earlier this notion of the generation of school spirit, school pride, sense of belonging that I think our varsity games can generate. And I think that that's also a way in terms of the whole student's experience of university is not just about being the student athlete, but also about that sense of connection of students in general to varsity sports. I think that also in terms of the brand of the university, the reputation of the university, and I think that our previous president, Sheldon Levy, requires a lot of kudos here in that he set the path, I think, for the success of varsity athletics at Ryerson in terms of brand and reputation. But this notion of whole student, we really do see that they come with their spiritual sense, with their emotional sense, with their academic sense, with their sporting sense. And I think that university athletic departments are uniquely placed to support young people in their journey towards their athletic and their academic endeavors.
It's such a great way to say that, like that support on the journey is really what our young people need. I love that answer. Greg, when you think about the journey and Olympic quad shifting, what are some key learnings that businesses or all of us as people can gain from the resiliency athletes are showing right now to thrive coming out of this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, everyone knows, with the shift in the last Olympic quad, with the Olympics getting postponed a year, how challenging that was on many athletes. And I actually spoke with, a lot of the athletes who competed in Tokyo and chatted about, well, lots of the things that they were noticing, the challenges. And a lot of what they were mentioning are things that we, as individuals and citizens and people within our communities have dealt with, and then also, within businesses. So what do I mean by that? First, the mental toll of the pandemic on everyone is real. I've spoken with people who have multiple Olympic gold medals, people that we hold up on pedestals, and they openly acknowledge that the pandemic was hard on people. I think everyone, as a society, we need to continue to acknowledge that the mental health aspect of this is real, and we need to be ensuring that we're focusing on that, that we're all taking time to get outside, speak with people, ensure that we're staying, mentally healthy. And then the next piece is looping back to what my earlier response was around that focus on a North Star. The athletes that were able to maintain that hyper focus and that clear acknowledgement of where they're looking to go, what they're looking to achieve, were able to come away from the games in a better position, better standing, and ultimately better results. And it's the same, we see that in business, when I'm working with my clients, those who are able to maintain that focus and have a clear line of sight, like even though the world has shifted, the objectives that they're looking to achieve, what the impact they're looking to have on their communities and their society and their customers and partners and stakeholders, is still there. And those that, maintained it, worked towards it, and adjusted and pivoted, but stayed true to their North Star, came away the strongest. So the pandemic impacted everyone in society, and I think we all need to acknowledge that. And those that did were able and are able to pivot and move forward from there.
I love that, and I think pivot is something athletes learn to do, and it's a great skill set that all of us in business are either figuring out or practicing right now, for sure. I appreciate that answer. pivoting's tough when you're only good at one thing. So I want to get to part of Brady's question here in the Q&A, Sherry, and I'll start with you. What's your sense on early or over specialization in sport and how the pandemic may shift it? Are kids going to be locked in to just one sport now? Maybe the pandemic rules state that you can only be outdoors. Do you think kids were kind of like, maybe I don't want to be in a hockey rink 6 days a week and I want to try something else? Just your gut feeling on how you think young people are going to come out of this pandemic when it comes to specialization.
I think I'll just back up a little bit on this one. From, I think it's Brady, you said someone had asked a question in the chat. I think a sport, it's going to take us years, like any area of society, to figure out the impacts of COVID-19, and sport and youth sport is one of those. And I, despite doing most of my work in research and partnerships with professional commercial sport properties, I have two boys myself, 9 and 13. And I say that because I'm most concerned about youth sport. And I have a son, 13 is at a pivotal age for hockey, et cetera, et cetera. But I also wanted to add, just for context, that I'm really fortunate over the last year and a half to work with a friend of ours, Justin and some others at Canadian Tire Jumpstart, and I was part of the review team for their COVID relief 19 funding. And I only add that because it's allowed me to look at some of these profiles of youth and youth programs over the nationally, because Jumpstart's given out between 10 and $15 million to programs that have been affected by programming and participation due to COVID-19. And I think the whole matter of, and I'm sure everyone has a perspective on this that is equally valuable, but from what we've seen from the data there, where, as per the question around specialization, that is a bit of a concern, but that's also a little bit defined as a privilege concern, being able to be a specialist in a particular area of sport. Where the true pressure points are, I would argue, are with at-risk populations, lower income populations, and actually ensuring that children can get out of the house and play and participate. And so I acknowledge the question, Brady, but I think it's truly more of a critical question from, at least as I said, the data that we've been looking at, really just ensuring that youth have access to physical activity and sport. And I'm equally concerned about, and I know we can look at, non-gendered populations as well, but girls and boys are dropping out of sport. They're coming out of sport, and we know this anecdotally, and we know this from a research way. Boys, we project 10 to 15%. Girls, we project it's going to be higher. 25% are going to drop out at youth sport. So I start this conversation in response to your question a little bit aside to probably looking at specialization, because I think that's a critical talking point just to address. And I think everyone here is in a place where I'm sure they have a different, but a joint perspective. But I just wanted Justin to address it from that perspective, and really, as I said, tap into what I'm doing with Jumpstart.
You see, I did say, in fairness, that your entire career has been centered around equity. So I appreciate that answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other, yeah. It
is so true. The equitable access piece. Luis, you were nodding your head. Do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more than with what Sherry has just said. I think that this is the question. I think it's historically been problematic with respect to general participation in physical activity. I think that there's this general sense that recreation is fun and it's for everyone, and access is available and whoever wants to take part can. But it's simply not true pre-pandemic, and it's of ultra concern now. And certainly I think most would agree that many people from equity deserving groups have grown up in schoolyards and physical education classes and sports spaces that have been unwelcoming and even unsafe. And I think also that given that racism and sexism, homophobia, transphobia exist outside of our walls, we must also accept they are part of us on the inside as well. So from an equity perspective, it's not just about general access and general participation in the post-pandemic. I think that this is a larger question that the pandemic only really compounds the problem of. And I also think that we as recreation professionals need also to spend time really deeply contemplating this. That, you know, we who are occupying paid positions in recreation now have always and most often had experiences in sport and recreation that's positive, and not every person that this is true for. So I think, and I also think that perhaps the pandemic has made us a little bit more empathetic to the needs and experiences of other people. And I think that we need to take advantage of that and to really think about ways to address the systemic barriers that have historically been in place. And also to work, I think, at the community level with respect to how we can ensure that we're not going to lose this generation of young people, because as Sherry makes mention of the research and the dropout rate that is particularly alarming now, it was alarming before the pandemic. So that we really do have, I think, a crisis that we're facing now with respect to physical activity and us really using the opportunity to link up engagement in physical activity with a view to benefits with respect to mental health, with respect to physical health, with respect to emotional well-being. So I'm with Sherry on this one. We have a problem, and it's not a quick fix, and it's easier to state the problem than it is to address it.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in here and build upon it. I think, you know, one area that I'm seeing that we really need to look at as a society is our open spaces, and, you know, how they differ in between communities. I'm sure, you know, a lot of us during the pandemic saw the pictures of, you know, there were some communities where the basketball hoop had a piece of 2x4 over it, and then another community where it had a tennis court, people are playing tennis. So we definitely saw some inequities, you know, between the recreational opportunities that are available to different communities. And I think it's time as a society and as a city, you know, we're based in Toronto. We're lucky. We're all connected to this urban university, which, you know, I love. I love the fact that we're Toronto based. I'm a Toronto boy till I die. But we do need to look at where how we're structuring our city. How are we, you know, ensuring that everyone has access to recreation, because we now know that it's so important for mental health and physical health and people within the community. So I think we have to, you know, put that forth to our community leaders.
Julio, love for you to jump in on that as well.
Yeah, so like two things for me. One, the basketball net stuff was annoying because that was therapeutic to me during COVID. I would just go out, shoot hoops. I go one day and I'm like, what's going on here? Two, I think access is something us with the Blue Jays have talked about before. Like, we've had calls with our players, like, how do we grow the sport? And one of our players that we drafted, I think a year or two ago, was Harrison Ray. He's like, man, some of us didn't have access to baseball. And that one hit me because it resonated a lot with me, because I grew up downtown Toronto. There's no baseball facilities downtown. And my parents were working parents, like, my whole life. Like, I was taking the subway as a 7-year-old on my own to go to practice. But I was lucky and fortunate that my parents liked baseball and they wanted me to play baseball, just the Venezuelan background. But I had friends who I think would have been great, super athletic kids who would have excelled in baseball, but didn't get the opportunity to, because they didn't have a parent that could take them. You know what I mean? So they didn't have access to it. So for me, it's figuring out how, it's everything we've just said. Like, how do we grow this? How do we use spaces properly, and just giving, I guess, certain demographics the opportunity to play and grow up in a sport. Because I guarantee if you give access to some of these kids, they're going to run with it, and we're going to see some very skillful kids come out of it.
Such a great point, Sherry.
I wanted to, before we get off of it, just add, because I gave a very holistic answer, and I'm sure other people can, but to the particular question that came in about over specialization, I would just add that I'm not a sports scientist in the way I look at developing models or or kinesiology, et cetera. But there's an abundance of research now, given all the factors we've all just talked about and more, that things like over specialization, choosing a hockey team based on size when they hit, puberty or the age of hitting, those models are outdated. And I would say the sports systems are re-looking at all of those. So to the person that answered your question, I'm happy, if we haven't given enough information in this quick time, to provide some of those resources or other labs that are doing some more cutting edge work in that space.
No, that's really good. I want to pick up on something that Julio just touched on, that if some kids were given access, who knows where they would take it. Well, let's talk about it, because we've danced around it a little bit today around the systemic barriers that a lot of racialized kids face. I want to hear from each of you your thought on what's one tangible thing we can do as leaders in sport to create greater access. I'll start with you, Louise.
Well, I would take the fact that 50,000 students at Ryerson pay a mandatory fee to access our facilities. And yet many few thousand than 50,000 actually do. So I don't think it's just a matter of access. I think it's about building that joy of movement at a very young age. And I think that our current school structures of physical education take the joy out of it for many. So I think it's about the way in which physical activity is taught in our elementary and secondary schools by non-experts. You can opt out at the earliest possible age, and multiple thousands do. So I think it's about bringing the joy back into movement and to instilling that at an early age, and creating confidence in the teachers who are teaching physical education, who are elementary teachers who don't have a specialization. I think that is key. And then I think it's about universities having another moment in time to engage. And we know from research that if we don't engage them early in their undergraduate career, they tend never to cross the threshold to participate. We're hard at work in terms of articulating recreation engagement as a learning strategy. Evidence is that you go and you work out that you are smarter when it comes to grades and your GPA and retention and staying in school. So I think we have my answer is, with respect to access, is everyone has access, but we need to provide them a hook and a reason to come in and participate with us. I think that this age group of young people, you can't knock them over the head with, oh, it's good for your heart. It's good for, they want to engage, I think, in terms of mental health. The reasons for engagement, we need to re-articulate to make clear to them the benefits that's going to be attractive as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old. But we have the access.
It's such a great point. Greg, you obviously fell in love with moving, to Louise's point, early. How do we get more kids that look like you into the sport you love?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll before I even start, I'll acknowledge, like, I'm a Black guy in a very predominantly white sport, sailing. It's a fact of the sport, not just in Canada, but globally. But one of the reasons I fell in love with it, and I was so fortunate, is I was blessed that my parents believed in allowing me to pick the sports that I love. So when I was a youth, I did everything. I played rugby, soccer, baseball, basketball, sailing, track, swimming. I literally did a sport every day of the week, when I was growing up. And to me, that is how I see kids getting into sport and staying in sport, is allowing them to self-select the sports that they love. So having youth programs that not only just have the soccer, basketball fundamentals, but how do we get kids to have a chance trying fencing, or have a chance running down the bobsled track, or doing something that's completely different, but they may develop a huge passion for, and that will allow them to stick within the sport post turning 16, when we see so many athletes drop out, and bring it into a lifelong sport by them, self-selecting the sports that they love. So that's how I see we get more kids within it. And I think, in Canada, we're very fortunate. that we have access to lots of different sports. So, you know, let's get those sports in front of kids.
That's incredible. I would have tried Ron Greg, but you all are in just such great shape. I don't think it would have worked for me anyway. Julio, on that point about falling in love with being active, the Jays, not just the Jays, but baseball is making a huge investment in South and Central America to get kids active. What's the key to keeping them engaged? Let's say they don't crack that major league roster.
Yeah, keeping them. So this is something we as scouts like really have to figure out when it comes to knowing our players. Like, they have to love the sport. So, and it goes back to what's been said, like, you have to love it in order to dive in and get to the best potential. Because we see so many talented kids, and we've done this. Like, we've signed talented kids that don't actually love the sport. They just want the money, and that's fine. I mean, hey, if I was, maybe I would be the same as them, right? Like, I can't speak on that, but you have to know that they love it, that they're gonna grind every single day to be the best version of themselves, and you can figure that out the more time you spend with kids, and they're gonna show you who they are. And just kind of in response to what's already been said, like, I do think there comes a point where when you are playing a sport or an activity, the minute it becomes a job, the minute you lose like the fun, you're done. You're not gonna play anymore. So there's a fine line, and I think getting the right resources that's mentioned already is getting the right resources, people who want to be there to help coach. That goes in like the gym classes and everything. So that's just my opinion on that. I don't really have an answer to all this either, but this is just my experience.
It's great, man. It's so true. The love is really, really important. I appreciate that answer. We're getting close to wrapping. I want to ask a question to each of you. Sherry, I'll start with you. I need some positivity to leave this call. Give me something positive that you see in the future of sport.
You know, I instinctively go back to, you know, why I got into it, which because I had so many great experiences in sport business. And I think, I think there's, despite a tough year, and despite some of these numbers that don't look so great, I think there is some great champions behind not only making the sports system better, but trying to make the sport, you know, sport in general, from the commercial on down or grassroots on up, better. And so those kinds of things, for example, you know, I'm so impressed by the WNBA and how those female athletes are such strong activists and have made it okay to speak out, and put a hand up and stand up, and it is accepted now. And to me, there's, over the last year, perhaps because it's COVID, perhaps because we have more time to see what's happening on Twitter and Facebook or whatever, but I'm inspired by this real wave of advocacy and making things better. Even the role that you have is new, and I'm sure it's challenging, Justin, but it's important. And so I'm excited about where those things are going to go.
That's a great answer, and thank you for that. Julio, one thing that's making you feel just positive about the future of sport?
I think so. Within the Blue Jays, we've been doing a lot of DE&I initiatives. I think personally for me, what I love about my job, yes, is, you know, I get to follow baseball as my love. But I started realizing where the real passion lies is my ability to help people in other countries who come from nothing. And I didn't know that at the time, that's really what it was. Like, I was just like, oh, I like baseball, and this is just a great way to stay within it. And I think as the years have gone by, I see these kids, I see them grow up, I see them mature, I see them turn into like grown-ups, that, you know, that their personalities change, their priorities change. And it is, for me, one of the greatest things, from watching a 15-year-old at a workout to making the majors, or just on the cusp of making the majors, has been incredible. And that is one of the biggest satisfactions for me. And so just having that, I guess, privilege to continue to do that and give back to like the baseball community And I would love to do that in Toronto and help out kids in Toronto as well and grow the game and just help people in general just grow. That to me is what I love to do.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for that. Luis, something that's making you feel positive about the future of sport.
I'll give two answers. One answer is on the home front at Ryerson. When I think about our student athletes, and they were sidelined last year, they've come back with such enthusiasm, shown such grit and resilience, and have such optimism. So I think that makes me feel optimistic for the future of sport, and I think for the future of our young people and our citizenry in general. And then I think the other answer is the women's gold medal Olympic soccer team, and the stories of how many of the players on the current team who won gold this year in 2021 were looking at those bronze medalists in 2012 and as little girls, in terms of them seeing that they wanted to be like those players when they got older, and there they are. So I think that is a very optimistic note as well.
Thank you kindly. Greg, no pressure, but you got the guy behind you to inspire you for this final shot.
Yeah, for me, I've found what's inspiring most this year is actually we've seen a lot of proof of concept of mixed team sports. So at the Olympics, we saw mixed relay. At the Cycling World Championships, we now have mixed events. In sailing, we have mixed events. And I watched a lot of them. I noticed that the strategies are still being worked out throughout them, that there's not just like, oh, the men just do this part and the women do this part. Countries and teams are working together, finding out the best strategies to work together. And what's proving is that in the future, I really think that there will be a lot more mixed team events. And I think this 2021 was a proof of concept. So for many of them, and I look forward to seeing, many different sports embracing it so that we have, mixed team events going forward. And who knows, maybe we'll have some mixed team events at university one day that we can go cheer on the Rams. But that was my exciting thing for the year, was that proof of concept for mixed team sports.
Greg, you were supposed to make the ball hit the rim a few times. That was an absolute swish.
Yeah.
Thank you for closing it in such a good way. I'll invite Christian back to give final remarks, but thank you to all of the panelists on behalf of myself. Thank you for making this an easy flowing conversation. You made my job really easy. So really, really took away a lot for myself as well. So thank you, and miigwech.
Wow, what an amazing session, covering such a wide range of issues and insights on a way forward. I just want to thank everybody here for your honesty, your perspectives, your generosity of time. A huge thank you, Justin, for moderating this really special panel. You made this a real conversation amongst peers and friends. It's just brilliant. And we'll have you back for more for sure. Louise, Sherry, Greg, and Julio, clearly we could hear from you for hours on end. And on that note, I hope there will be, and we will plan for another opportunity to bring us back together to check in as we contend with this long-term impact of COVID and the journeys we're all pursuing as this unfolds. And moreover, the university is really lucky to have your association and leadership in this regard. And so thank you for all that you're doing here and in your communities. And a special thank you to everyone who joined us today. I'm sure you will agree that these are the kinds of conversations that shape change and indeed our future. So these are the kinds of conversations we want you, our alumni, our students, our partners and friends, to be a part of every day. So stay tuned for more. And on that note, our closing slide has a QR code, which you can scan to see our slate of events over the course of this Alumni Week. Everyone is welcome, so please register for as much as you can, or encourage others to do so if you haven't already. That's all for today. Thank you all for participating, and to our panel, to Justin and our alumni relations team. Thank you all for your energy and leadership. Bye for now, and have a great one.